facility and got all the players right in a row. Nick Nurse, then Daryl Morey, then Derek and I had to get in our Transformers and fly across the Ben Franklin Bridge. Then we arrived at the office and things are moving around. People are in and out of the building. It's been quite chaotic. So you guys are going to have to forgive us if we're a little frazzled.
If you had a Transformer for a car, which one? No, it's an off-season topic. We will get into that.
I mean, Megatron's the best one. So it's, if you want to be like a little kid who is like, hey, my favorite player is LeBron or Steph Curry or whoever, that's who you would pick for sure.
Does not entirely surprise me you went that route. Anyway, we're completely off topic and we have a lot of topics to get to. I guess, where would you like to start overall? Because like I said, we talked to a lot of people that are involved. We got a few more details on the trade, including some protection on the pick swap. We've probably had some time to digest the trade. Probably start off with what is most newsworthy or the most recent in terms of today's availability. What was sort of like your overall takeaway from that?
Number one takeaway is that none of these guys have slept in 2 days, essentially. And so I feel some real kinship solidarity with the likes of Robert Covington and Marcus Morris, KJ Martin, Nic Batum. Kind of the big headline of all their availabilities was, man, this has been a topsy-turvy couple of days. And so, I feel there's a place in my heart for all those guys. Obviously, they are on nicer flights and nicer seats than I am when I'm flying.
That's not how you got out to Colorado?
When I'm flying coach and sitting in the back and what have you. But it's nice to know that they're as disrupted by this as I am. I guess we have to start, Derek, I think, with Daryl Morey, right? Like him talking about the collapse of the relationship with James is certainly not brand new. We got his impressions, his thoughts on Media Day, but was there a standalone quote or idea or thought from him that you think is worth sharing with the people?
Yeah, I mean, he basically, the only thing he really expressed regret for is the fact that James got to the point where he felt like he had to ask out before they officially made an offer. And again, there's some legality there where like you can't formally make an offer, but whatever caused James to get to the point where he felt like one that he wanted wasn't coming. That seemed like the only, like, I think Daryl would have preferred for him to, opt out and they could negotiate. And if it sounded like that's what Daryl really regretted. He did kind of hesitate to really go too deep into his own personal relationship with James, how much that has taken a hit, how much he thinks they can get that back. He sort of mentioned that this was a blip on the radar and that he felt like by the time James got to his Hall of Fame introduction speech, that this would be just sort of like a footnote. We'll see whether or not that's true. Certainly that's what he wants to express is true. There's probably some truth to it, right? Time heals all wounds, especially if James ends up getting the contract that he wanted. Hart or Morey sort of went out of his way to point out, like, look, ultimately James got what he wanted. He got to the place he wanted to go to. It might have taken a little bit longer, but we all kind of came away with what we wanted out of this deal. I think from Morey's perspective, he probably believes that. Does James believe that? I don't know, but I think that's sort of where we're at.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, the next shoe to drop in all of this is certainly when James does his introductory press in Los Angeles. I think traditionally, as you and I have said multiple times, Derek, he's pretty guarded, but I think you lose the reputation as guarded when you compare this to a failed marriage and you call Daryl Morey a liar and you go on the record saying quite a few spicy, splashy things. I guess the takeaway for me is that they've already admitted and Daryl has already admitted this is a move that begets another move, right?
Sure.
And that he certainly is not going to be on the record right now saying, yeah, we need a playmaking guard or we need a ultra 3-and-D wing, or certainly not going to tamper and be like, yeah, I'd love to have OG Anunoby on this team or Zach LaVine, whoever it might be. But I think he said outright, we're going to take a look at this group, and he thinks most people would still place them behind Boston and Milwaukee. I think that group of people would include the two people who are on the podcast currently. But I think the mood is, I wouldn't say shifted because they weren't super disrupted by this whole thing. But there's some stability now throughout the organization that will at least give them some peace of mind when they get blown off the floor by teams that are going to be better than them this year.
And Daryl went out of his way to point out, like, basically somebody asked him, you ended up not getting, man, like why did you end up making the move? And he said, look, we were pretty clear. We wanted either Man or another first round pick. They got that second first round pick.
And you and I had reported that several times over.
And reported that their interest in Man was mostly because they felt like they could trade him for another first round pick. They wanted that kind of draft capital to give them flexibility. They now have 3 draft picks that they can trade. It could be some combination mostly of their own or the Clippers, or in that 2026, it could be the Thunder. But they have 3 draft picks they can trade right now. It really becomes 4 if the trade doesn't happen until the draft, because you can select someone and then trade them out. So they have a lot more flexibility, and that was really what Daryl was going for. So again, I think from his perspective, he and Harden both sort of came away with what they were wanting. It may not have happened in a way that Philadelphia and the fans were comfortable with, but I think more importantly, he feels like the team was pretty comfortable with it and never truly got uncomfortable, which has been the word of the offseason and the early season. So I think from his perspective, it turned out okay.
All right, I just have to address Jay Bart in the comments saying that we need a high top table for the set.
Laptops.
I have said this several times on the show. What does the name laptop mean? What would you say what's the derivative there? Lap. The computer is on top of my lap, and that's where it goes. And it's okay that we have 2 different sets, one of which has a desk that we can place them there and you use it like a normal desktop computer. And it's okay to have this set where we get these nice, yes, more comfortable chairs than people in the chat seem to think they are. We're nice and at home here at PHLY. I appreciate the concern, but I promise we're doing okay.
If you want to set Kyle off and get him on a tangent, complain about the laptops on our laps. It will work almost every time. Almost every time.
Yeah. So another big takeaway, I would say, from Daryl's availability, and look, he admitted himself that we have to talk to Joel about this, but essentially said that it's his understanding that Joel's relationship with the organization, his happiness with the direction that they're moving in, really strong right now, that Joel feels good about all this. Now, the subtext to that is a lot of star players feel good until they don't anymore, and they wake up one day and say, wow, I'm closing games with Nic Batum and Kelly Oubre. And,
or Jeremy Grant, to bring up a recent example.
Right. Whoever else might be out there that they're just sick of that shit. And that's a good sign, frankly, because we can say, hey, look, they got a good return or a bad return. They got enough or they didn't get enough. The only person whose judgment on that really matters is Joel, because the second that he's not available or not bought in anymore, the whole organization gets flipped upside down. And I don't mean flipped upside down in the sense of they got to answer questions about James Harden and his shenanigans off the floor. I mean, they're not going to win games anymore, or not win games at the clip that they're able to right now. So Joel is their human stability in so many ways, and having him on board, I think, is probably the headline of all this for the time being.
And look, besides the fact that I think Joe wants to compete in this city, I think he wants to stay here. Like you mentioned, for now, we never know when that tipping point could come. But I also think he looks at basketball very much through a GM's perspective and a team building perspective. And I think he's open to the conversations that Daryl will have for him. I think that's been true dating back to all the way back to Sam Hinkie. I think he's very interested in the team building aspect of it, and won't just look at, here are the players we have now, but here's the reasons why we have flexibility going forward. I think Joe will listen to that perhaps more than some other superstars would. And again, there's always a tipping point, and you never know when that's going to be. The easiest example of that is Dame, where he was loyal until he just had enough. I just don't think we're anywhere near it. Morey actually sort of addressed this, that all the noise is coming from opposing teams who basically want to create chaos. I think that's largely true. And again, I hate saying it over and over that we just don't know, like, if there ever will be a point where that's not true. And because of that, it will always be a concern. But I think they're in a pretty good spot. And quite frankly, I think Joe and his belief in Tyrese Maxey, I certainly don't think that I think Joe believes that they have more championship equity than maybe the average person listening to the show right now believes, both because he has confidence in himself, in Morey, and really crucially in Tyrese.
And that's how you want the best player on the team to approach it. Like when Joe came out on media day and said essentially, like, look, this situation is what it is, but I believe as long as I'm on the team, we have a chance. You don't want your best player, a guy who's a top 5, top 10 player in the league, to sit there and cry at media day like, oh man, I really need more help and I
Right.
need this. Like, it's one thing to have those internal conversations, right? And just to push the front office. And as we saw with Giannis in the offseason, I think him going on a podcast and essentially saying, well, I don't know how long I'll be here if everybody's not on the same page with
Mhm.
me in terms of wanting to win. So there is value in that external pressure, but I think Joel has done the right thing to project strength. I think it's part of what allowed them to have a strong training camp in Colorado, a good preseason, a preseason where they accomplished a lot in terms of getting their identity established early. We've already talked about that, Derek, that we've seen that in the first few games of the season, that they already look like a Nick Nurse team. I think that's a major positive. And I think that all trickles down from the top. So Joel certainly is a huge part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is amazing to look at everything now and you go, all right, Tyrese is playing better than I think even anyone really could have predicted. It's only 3 games. Great start. They're playing good basketball. They're playing exciting basketball. They're playing, hectic defense. And they should be able to continue to do that with some of the pieces that they got. They're probably deeper than they've been at most points in the Joel Embiid era. And they don't have the black cloud of James Harden hanging over their head anymore. Are they perfect? Are they a complete product? No. And I think if you talk to Daryl Morey, truthfully on background, he would tell you there's still more to come. They have work to do. He will bring up some comment about championship odds and that they feel like they have Joel Embiid and they have a chance and yada, yada, yada. But I think if deep down, he would say there are going to be ways in the future that we can increase those odds. I think that's true. And I think they're pretty well positioned. We talked about this a lot yesterday, but the fact that you have so much matching salary that can be traded, basically the start of January. You have now 3 draft picks that you can trade. They have ways to get in on the next Jrue Holiday that becomes available when they didn't have trades to get in on Jrue Holiday at all. There was just no avenue for them to add somebody like that to maybe complete this core. And with Maxey playing better and growing and seemingly having no limit on how much he can grow, not only do you now have more assets and more chips to use in a trade, but you have more archetypes that you can go and try to pursue. And you hope that growth from Max keeps going, because then they go from a spot where I think we looked at it and you said it's going to be tough for them to really beat Boston and Milwaukee to they have options now, and it's not quite as doom and gloom. And a lot of that comes down to Tyrese, but part of that comes down to this trade too.
Yeah, and so you brought up Jrue, Derek. Jrue actually got name dropped during Daryl's availability.
Yep.
It was a frame of reference for, look, this is what Jrue Holiday went for, which was, I'd say, 2 probably better players than anyone the Sixers got back. Is that fair? In Robert Williams and Brogdon, at least maybe more valuable on
Certainly
the open
more
market.
trade value.
I mean, Robert Williams probably has the most out of any of those guys, if I had to guess, based on youth and production. But multiple role players, multiple first-round picks, and the Sixers got a swap, a couple seconds, some interesting stuff there. We got the full details and all that today, which I might need you to personally explain the second round protection in 2024.
I haven't even looked into that yet.
The English on that is very lawyer-esque. So, I think Daryl looked at the Jrue trade, and that was certainly someone they were hoping to get in the mix for and got priced out of, but looked at that as the bar, essentially, or a bar they were looking to clear or meet with the Harden trade. I think ultimately they probably ended up doing that.
Yeah. No, he said, we felt like we need to get this amount of assets back for Harden because we feel like this is what it requires to get in on some of these trades. And the Jrue and the haul that they got for him validated that.
And by the way, before we talk to our sponsors, Ronald said in the comments, it's his sole duty to get Kyle and Derek a national contract with the top company that sells hoodies. I don't know if that's a dig at the fact that we wear sweatshirts every day, or Ronald is really looking out for us.
I'll take as many hoodies as you can send my way.
I will take as many free hoodies as I can get. I actually have some more PHLY locker hoodies on the way now that I'm kind of familiar with the sizing. But maybe you guys can check out PHLY locker for yourselves and see what you like there. But
no, I'm the exact same way. Between September and March, I will wear a hoodie every day. I don't even care if it's 20 degrees outside. A hoodie is all I need, and I pretty much use it as just my normal clothing.
So while we answer,
if you have a hookup, Ronald, please,
by all means,
send them our way. Yes.
While we're on the subject of hoodie season and the changing temperatures, there is a company I think can help us out with the light changing, and maybe you're on the slopes, maybe you're just trying to work through the sunshine, Derek.
Did you say maybe you were going to get on the slopes? Did I hear that right?
We got a lot of likes on that video yesterday, but the combination of the snow on the ground and the sun, well, Shady Rays can certainly help you out because you can gear up for the season ahead with quality shades built to last. And in addition to their premium polarized shades, they have quick swap snow goggles that won't break the bank. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company that offers an unrivaled product that's just as good as any expensive pair we've worn. Durable frames, world-class optics for all outdoor adventures. And if you're into winter sports, their quick swap snows. I told you every time. It's every time. Their quick swap snow lenses switch easily from full sun to low light. So don't let changing light conditions slow you down on the slopes when all you need is Shady Rays snow goggles. And that's not all. Shady Rays offers the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair of sunglasses is backed by lost or broken replacements. So if you lose or break your pair, even on day one, they told us they'll send you a brand new pair, no questions asked. Wear your Shady Rays with confidence because they have your back long after you purchase. And Shady Rays is also committed to making a difference in communities across the U.S. through their impact program, teaming up with nonprofits to help people live healthy, courageous lives through some of their most challenging times. And if you don't love your Shady Rays, exchange for a new pair or return them for free within 30 days. No risk when you shop. Their team always has your back with personal and fast support. So exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out an amazing deal for the season. Go to shadyrays.com and use code PHLY for 50% off 2+ pairs of polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself. The shades rated 5 stars by over 250,000 people. I cannot. How do I mess up anytime it's the snow goggles? It's in my head now. I have the yips with the snow goggles.
And I'm sure at home in the mirror when you're practicing, it probably comes across perfectly, but you get out in front of an audience. Never have you related to some of the former Sixers more than you do now. Anyway, let me tell you about Hero Bread and see if I can do this without stumbling through the ad read. Like Kyle. Although, Kyle, I got to admit, you might have stumbled that one. You are an ace on the ad reads normally.
I'm just trying to hold down the fort until Devon gets here.
You and me both, buddy. Anyway, like I said, let me tell you about Hero Bread. Like I've said in the past, I have been buying, brand name low carb bread for years. It's one of the tricks I've used to really sort of meet my dietary goals. So when we got Hero Bread in the studio here, I made sure to try it out, put in an order, and I've been using it every day since. As not only do I find it a better fit for my dietary needs, but they offer everything from sliced breads, tortillas, burger and hot dog buns, and more delivered directly to your door. Oh,
there
I'm doing
you
worse
go.
than you.
Now we're flubbing all the ad reads.
Enjoy all the taste without the guilt. The bread is fluffy, delicious, and flavorful. I did flavorful again. Oh, I'm way off. High in fiber and low on net carbs with fewer calories than the leading national brand and 5 to 10 grams of protein per serving. And you can either place a one-off order or set up a subscription so you can get Hero Bread delivered to your door every 2 weeks, every month, or whatever you need to make sure you're stocked up and ready to go. Right now, Hero Bread is offering the PHLY fam 10% off their first order. Just go to hero.co and use code PHLY to save on Hero Bread today. That's hero.co to save 10% today. There, I just want to make you feel better. So I can.
Oh yeah, that's all it was.
Yep.
I wanted to, so I don't want to do a whole trade podcast today because I do want to, or future trade target podcast, but we do have a lot of people in the comments who are kicking around names and maybe early speculation on that. I think the obvious ones that have popped up at this point, Levine, who I think we've talked about a lot. I think the Sixers' interest is probably lower than has been suggested, mostly because of the contract situation. I think Levine has some issues defensively. Certainly, there are some leadership questions. The Bulls are kind of perpetually unhappy while he's there. Now, maybe that changes with him being a 2/3 on a given night rather than the number one guy as he is in Chicago. I'm not really sure. The Toronto guys are the more interesting ones. Siakam, I think there's too much out there regarding the relationship with Nurse for me to think that they're going to push hard for him at any point. I'm not super confident in that. Do you think, Derek, during this season, they would make a real play for OG Anunoby? Do you think he fits what they need or what they want?
So I think you're right in that the trade targets you look at are a lot like the free agent targets you would have next summer, because those are the players who are the threat to leave. So those are the players who teams want to get value for while they still can. And it's maybe not as critical now as it used to be in prior years, because you can do a sign and trade a little easier. Although now with the new CBA and some of the rules on hard capping with when you acquire a player in a CBA, that might change. So I think there's going to be a lot of these kind of players who are unhappy or at least frustrated in their role or with the team being moved at the deadline before they get to free agency. So I think those are the ones you want to target. And you're talking about OG. I think he has a player option, a very small player option. He's almost guaranteed to turn it down for next year. Siakam will be a free agent. So I think that is where you look. I like OG a lot. And I think defensively, he's incredible. Offensively, I think he's pretty overrated, especially as a decision maker. He just doesn't have it. He tries to do a little too much off of pick and rolls and off the dribble. And if he would get here, you would want that to stop. Quite frankly, I think at times Nic over-empowered him relative to his skill set with Toronto, which maybe that means that he likes Nic more than maybe Pascal does. I don't know. But I certainly like that kind of versatility on defense. I think he's one of the 5 to 10 best defenders in the league. So I would certainly have interest. I worry about that contract. I think he's going to be overpaid pretty badly.
Moran in the comments called Masai a basketball terrorist. I want to be clear that I did not say that, since apparently I am.
But
now
he also
a
doesn't really disagree
hater
with you either.
So to your point, Derek, I think the only issue, if I have one with OG, and I guess we would say injuries too. He's had some pretty extensive and frankly catastrophic injuries in the past that he's mostly gotten past, but a red flag for sure, is whether he wants to be in the role that you'd want him to play on offense.
So on the one hand, on offense, he's a pretty consistent, like 37 to 40% 3-point shooter.
Yes.
And if you do that with the kind of defense that he brings, that is an incredibly valuable player, especially if Tyrese Maxey makes a jump that it looks like he has made, and you're really just looking for a supplementary person. But if he wants to be a 20-point per game scorer, he's never reached that plateau. But if he wants to grow into that, he's still pretty young. I don't think you want to give him the contract and then over-empower him offensively to the point where he's playing outside of his skill set. I agree 100%.
I would say he's a fourth option who believes he's at least a number 3. And if you brought him here in a big midseason trade, he's kind of by default your number 3, right? Like, I think Tobias has shown he's willing to fade in and out in a lineup based on what the team wants him to do, requires him to do. I'm not sure that OG has shown that same level of restraint. Now that, look, to your point, I do think if you buy into the idea that he can grow as a shot creator, sure, okay, then give him those opportunities, give him those chances, and say get to the next level. But I think he's kind of far enough in at this point that I'd say you got to get him to pull back a little bit, and maybe that means you're bringing somebody else in short term or simultaneously as him so that the pecking order becomes clear. But that's my only concern. To your point, I think he is maybe the best. If he's not the best switch defender in the league, he's in the top 3. I'd say it's like him, Bam Adebayo, because Bam can defend centers all the way down to ones. I don't even know who else is really in the conversation. Maybe Jaren Jackson, but foul prone and has his issues with that stuff. I think he's awesome defensively and is a good offensive player, but certainly not a great one.
He's a useful offensive player who probably wants to do more than he should. No, I agree with you that his age is a great benefit, because whatever contract you sign him to, he's going to be in his prime for the entirety of it, assuming injuries don't shorten that. So his age is a real plus in that regard, but I don't think you look at the age and say he's 26, he'll be 27 by the time he signs the next contract. Don't expect him to grow into significantly more than he currently is. I think we kind of fell into a little bit of that trap with Tobias all those years ago. At that age, if they're not a real shot creator and a real half-court dynamic player, don't expect them to become that. So if you sign him for what he is, and look, Gavin brought this up in the chat, he's going to be overpaid. That's sort of the nature of free agency. That's how you have to, that's why you can't build the core of your team through it. But for the Sixers and where they are, a player who can help them contend for the next year, next 4 years, perfectly lines up with Embiid's prime and with Maxey's prime. You would live with that overpay. It's just, is that going to cost you all of your assets at the trade deadline? Probably, because I think there's maybe not all 3 picks, but certainly 2 picks. I think there's going to be a lot of suitors out there for him.
Here's another one that I saw pop up on social yesterday, but it's also been mentioned in the the chat today. What do you think it would take to get Danny Ainge to move Larry Markkinen? Because he's on a smallish contract for the time being. So you wouldn't even have to move a ton of stuff in terms of the outgoing players. He's only locked up. He's got a partial guarantee next year. He'd be making about $18 million, which he's got issues defensively that I don't love. But if you pair him with Embiid and you have a true 3-point volume shooter, a guy who's an elite volume shooter at that, and Markkinen.
Yep.
That's a really interesting guy to pair next to Joel. And frankly, he's a better shot creator than I thought he would be when he came into the league. I thought, he almost looked like a dying arch type as he's coming in. It's like, a stretch 4 type guy, but he's shown more positional versatility than I would have expected coming into the league. And the 3-point shooting is crazy. I mean, he's taken like 10 threes a game,
at
making
43%.
So that's outrageous.
And even last year it was 8 per game at like 39. Like he's been real good on volume. And to your point, like stretch 4s, I think used to be overrated a lot because like we would treat them as like true big men and then they couldn't defend in space. But also like when you call him a stretch 4, there's almost like a qualifier of like, he's not really a high volume shooter. Well, no, this guy is a high volume shooter. I don't know what it would take for Ainge to trade him.
Well, because we brought up Masai being a basketball terrorist.
Yeah.
Danny Ainge is like the OG basketball terrorist, not trading anybody for anything.
And I feel like Utah's pivot now should be to use some of their assets to go in rather than maybe delay their next step. But I don't know. It's a good question.
It kind of depends on, I feel like, so this year was it's a pause year for Utah. I don't think they're tanking, but they're not exactly pushing chips in to win. I wonder if things go really south for them and they just say, let's try to cash in on Markkinen while we can, that might be an interesting thing. And then, so here's just a hypothetical. I have no idea what it would take to get him and other stuff. But if you could get him and then you're getting a real wing, that becomes really interesting to me. You have Tyrese and Joel as the bookends. You get a real dude on the wing, a good 3-and-D type guy at the 2. Maybe you get Melton back on a decent contract, and you have Markkinen as that high volume 3-point shooter. That's a really interesting team to me. Now, making all that happen with what they have, even with all the cap space and the picks, I don't know that that's feasible. But
they have so many draft picks. It's that Minnesota trade is just mind-boggling.
That's the problem. Is like I don't know that getting a couple of draft picks really helps. Yeah. So that's maybe Utah flips that into something else that they like. But I think they really like Markkinen, so I think it'd be hard to get them to come off of him and get another guy who's a shot creator defense type player.
No, I agree. All right. So I think we have, we've been, seems like a year of redemption for the Sixers here because, a lot of players on 1 year sort of prove it contracts. You and I are in a little bit of a prove it spot here with our next 2 ad reads. We got to do better than we did on the previous one. So why don't we kick that off here? First, I'm going to tell you about Game Time because buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. There's a lot of things you're going to want to go to, namely the Eagles coming here, but also the Sixers, who are a very exciting team right now that I think people are actually getting back into. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Game Time is the place for last-minute ticket deals. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of the seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You can buy tickets in a matter of seconds. 2 taps and you're set, with tickets sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code PHLY for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code PHLY for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
All right. Good job, Derek. So we're 1 for 1 in this ad break.
I'm completely bombing at least.
But now I have to
Done
tell
worse.
you, and I'm probably going to bomb this one because I'm just on a roll today, about our good friends at Soul Savvy. You guys don't want to miss out on the biggest sneaker drops. So download the Drops app by Soul Savvy, because the Drops by Soul Savvy app makes it easy to keep up with all the latest news, releases, raffles, and sales in the sneaker world. It is a one-stop shop for everything sneakers. There are instant notifications called drop alerts, so you never miss a release again. You'll get instantly notified whenever your size is available to buy. Free raffle management, so keep track of all the raffles that are happening in the sneaker world with a raffle tracker, and their accurate release calendar will keep you updates on all upcoming releases. So whether you're a casual buyer or an all-out sneakerhead, Soul Savvy has something for you with 3 different levels. There's the basic version, which is free, and then there's Mobile Plus or Premium. I have a premium subscription that Soul Savvy hooked me up with. I can't say enough about the team over there. Plotting out these releases, being in touch with you personally about what you're hunting, your size, if there's dead stock available in it. 2 thumbs up to the gang at Soul Savvy. And we have a drop alert this Saturday, November 4th. The Air Jordan 1 Reimagined Royal is dropping, and the Drops by Soul Savvy app will notify you when and where it's dropping. So download the Drops app and never miss a release. You guys need to sign up for Soul Savvy today by clicking the links in the description below, or by visiting links.soulsavvy.com/PHLY, or that's another or. Head over to the App Store and download the Drops by Soul Savvy app right now.
You redeemed yourself. You're getting a max contract.
I think I did pretty well. So because I did pretty well, I would love it if the people who are here with us who are not subscribed to the channel would hit that subscribe button. If you hit the bell icon, you can get notifications whenever we go live. And certainly, if you hit the thumbs up button on the video, it'll make Derek and I get a serotonin boost over here. And on top of that, Derek might convince me to film an embarrassing video of myself snowboarding or skiing this winter. And I think that would probably be worth the like that you give on this video.
We gotta come up. I think to be fair, it's got to be like you do something, I do something. So if we got to come up with a number where this amount of subscribers to the channel, to the YouTube channel. So go hit that subscribe button, and you will do that, and then I will come up with something that I will do. I think that's fair.
So one more trade thing in the comments before I wanted to get back on where I think we plan to take today's show. The 2-minute warning asked earlier.
Buddy, I have no idea where any show is going. It's all up in the air.
You just show up. I do the planning.
When we start talking, it could go in any direction.
So the 2-minute warning asked earlier, how much would it cost to go get Buddy Hield and TJ McConnell from the Pacers, and what do you guys think of them? So the good thing with Buddy specifically, I would say, he's an expiring. Yeah. So my issues with Buddy in the past were not that I didn't think he had value to a team. It's that you didn't want the long-term commitment. And I think Buddy specifically on an expiring contract, high volume 3-point shooter, guys that you can bring off the bench, that's super helpful. I just don't know that the Pacers are weird and that they're probably going to be a fringe playoff team, and Buddy's role is going to get moved around a little bit depending on where they're at. I'm not sure what the price is going to be on him. And maybe they say at the deadline, despite the fact that it came out before the year they were going to try to trade him, they might just say we need him and we're not willing to move him because making the playoffs or the play-in tournament is more valuable to us than, I don't know, like a late first-round pick from somebody, right?
Yeah. And the nice thing about where the Sixers are cap-wise is they can take back a little bit of money and still have enough room for a 30% max at the very least next year. So even bringing back someone like TJ, there's some wiggle room there for what they want to do. I guess we got a super chat here from Ash.
Thank you very much, Ash, by the way, for the super chat.
A very good way to make sure that we read your question.
I would say it's a guaranteed way to make sure we read your question.
But we'll read other questions as well.
We just can't guarantee it. Right. That's all.
Right. Is OG a star? Is Zach LaVine a star? What is your definition of a star player? It's a word thrown around a lot by many guys.
So here's what I would say. I think my view of it is that OG is not a star. He's a very good player that doesn't have for me, a star has to have real shot creation equity, right? I don't think there are maybe a few guys that are good enough defensively that you could say they're a defensive star, but I think historically you have to be a shot creation guy. I would call LaVine a star. I think he's a flawed star. And I think there are definitely tiers within that star system, right? So Joel, I think, is a superstar. Joel is in the very top tier of players in the league. Levine is a more of a fringe star, like a guy that has warts and problems that you have to work around with, but he's still a star. He's made all-star teams. He's a guy who puts up great highlights for sure and has a lot of self-creation juice, but I certainly am not putting him anywhere near the Joels, the Jokic's, even like the Jimmy Butlers who are below that top tier. Yep. Yeah, he's not anywhere near those guys.
No, I think in order to be and you're right, it's a word that has a lot of different meanings for a lot of different people, and it's sort of why I try to avoid using it. I think in order to be a star, you need to, first of all, like there's never he's overpaid. Stars can't be overpaid in my book. That's the benefit of the max salary. So there are however many people that are always going to be worth that max contract. You have to be one of those people. And also you have to be able to fit any team irrespective of context and role. Like you've got to be able to be someone who you value regardless of who you're playing alongside. You've got to be able to add value. And for those reasons, I don't think I would call Zach LaVine a star.
Interesting.
I don't necessarily think I wouldn't call OG a star either, although I think OG is more plug and playable if he's playing with the mindset of where he can, if he's playing with the right mindset in terms of his offensive role. I think he's very plug and playable, whereas Zach LaVine is not. But I also think star is like overused. Like, are we talking like
there can only be so many stars or the word loses all meaning,
right,
essentially.
Right. Yeah. And it changes when you start talking all about all-stars. Then you're talking 25 to 30 all-stars. It starts changing if you're talking about like all NBA, then there's only a couple. Certainly, I think everyone mostly agrees on a superstars. After that, it gets a little nebulous. But
yeah. So I'd say we leave the trade stuff for now, and we'll come back to it at some point.
I think there's probably a couple of quick notes to bring up just to get people up to speed, and that is Kelly is the short-term starter.
Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Yeah. Kelly Oubre, per Nick
especially
Nurse.
Since we are the Kelly Booster podcast,
the Kelly Oubre podcast.
Always predicted this moment would come. No, he is, and Nick went pretty far out of his way to mention it as a short-term starter. He mentioned that he likes Kelly coming off of the bench in sort of like that instant offense role, and he wants to give the new players a little more time to acclimate themselves. So we don't know if this will last for like 3 games, maybe 2 weeks, who knows? But it sounds like Kelly will start now and probably shift to a more bench role later on. And then the other thing probably to bring up is there is a 2029 pick swap that the Sixers got from the Clippers. And basically it means the Sixers have a chance it basically means that they're going to get the better of the 2 draft picks between the Clippers and their own in 2029. They have the right to swap picks. That is top 3 protected, which we learned earlier today. I believe that was from John Hollinger brought that up. I don't expect the Clippers pick. Basically, it means if the Clippers fall in the top 3 in 2029, the Sixers do not have the option of swapping that pick. Short term. I'd probably just worth getting those out there because there are new developments, and we've spent a little time here talking about random stuff.
Yeah, so on the Oubre front, I think both of us probably expected that at least Thursday against Toronto, Saturday against Phoenix, certainly. And then I think it probably starts to get interesting. I think Nurse alluded to the fact that probably looking at, on an optimistic timeline, Saturday will be the debut for most, if not all, of these guys. And this is the rest of the team has this cohesive identity. They spent the whole camp preseason together. Having James away made it so everyone who's here, other than the new guys, has an understanding of playing off of and with one another in this new system. I do sort of think, the more I've thought about it, that I think Batum might get first crack other than Oubre outside of.
I agree.
Outside of Oubre, I think he might get first crack at 5th starter, just because I think between his intelligence, his length, his ability to create for others just a little bit as a passer, the 3-point shooting, certainly a big swing skill, which when he's had good years, he's been a 39-40% shooter. I just think he profiles as a really good Nurse guy. Now, maybe that ends up being, you want that intelligence and that creativity off of the bench in a bench role, and you put someone in the starting lineup that maybe is protected a bit more by Maxey, by Joel, by the other guys that are there. But I think that's kind of where I'm leaning after thinking about it a little bit more.
Yeah. I'm leaning that for a couple of reasons. First, he feels like the best connective piece of the ones that they got. in terms of he will space the floor, or at least he has in years past. Best decision maker with the ball. Used to be the best secondary creator. Probably still is, because no one else from that group is a secondary creator. So even in a lesser state, he still is. And probably just the one that I think Nick Nurse is going to trust the decision making on the most. So I think he is, the most logical fit. The only other one, if it's not going to be Kelly, is, quite frankly, like you could see Dan House fitting into a role, just because, again, he can shoot and defend. But I think they're going to give it. I think Batum is the leader. Covington, I guess we'll see. Certainly in the past, he has defensively given you a lot, and I think he's someone who can find some success in the Nick Nurse defense. He was never a one-on-one ball stopper, and I certainly don't think with age he has become that. Mm-hmm. But in terms of forcing turnovers, causing a little bit of chaos, getting out in transition, I think there's a chance he could be it too. But I think Batum is a safe bet.
Yeah, well, because so here would be the argument if you're saying Batum does all those things and he's trustworthy and all that. Well, maybe you need that with the bench group, with the guys that really don't really have a shot creator off the bench that they can turn to and say, we're just going to give you the ball and let you figure things out. And so if you're looking at it from that perspective, you drop Batum in with those guys, he can be a stabilizer to an extent. You slide Rocco into that starting spot and he's essentially protected by the rest of them. But yeah, I think that'd probably be the wrong way to look at it. You just try to put the best 5-man group as you can to start the game and certainly to end games, and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah,
but we'll see.
Like, part of the problem here is that we just don't know how much each of these players have left. Like, I can tell you,
except for KJ. KJ is more of a how good is he?
Right. They're all sort of fighting their birth certificate. 3 of them are fighting it in terms of trying to not lose what they once had, and KJ in terms of the fact that he's not quite ready. And I do think I went back and I watched a little bit of KJ, and I think a lot of his athleticism turning into production, even on the defensive end, is a little more theoretical than maybe I thought. Like, I think it's going to take him some time. I think he needs to get better, man-to-man on the perimeter. I think he needs to get better fighting through screens, and I'm not as convinced of his ability to be in the rotation now as I was maybe at this time yesterday, but I still need to see a little more up close in person. He is definitely the most athletic of the group. That's for sure.
Oh, not even close. It's not even close. No. So the lineage there is off the charts. And I would say this about KJ. We've seen very little of him on a team that had any sort of direction, right? And so that Houston chaos down there is not exactly beneficial for a guy that is trying to find his way as a role player, because they have they had at least 1 or 2 high volume, lowish efficiency type players running the show down there. And when you're a guy trying to find his spot, that turns into you might not touch the ball for quite a long time. Maybe he gets into this Nick Nurse offense, this Nick Nurse system, and is touching it a little bit more, is given some here and there opportunities to self-create a little bit. He gets into a flow, as Tobias Harris likes to say. And he actually mentioned to us today, Derek, that he's got a history with Rico Hines, and he knows a bunch of the guys from being out in LA at workouts and just being in the LA basketball community. And so I think KJ, if he's going to make it somewhere, this is a great place for him in terms of the ecosystem. The fact that they're actually trying to compete and win right now relative to what he was in Houston, and he had barely gotten an opportunity yet in LA. So it's a big wait and see for me, but I agree with you. It's a lot hypothetical right now.
And we have a lot of discussion in the chat about backup centers. I don't think that's going to be a priority at all. I think they're pretty confident in the 2 that they have in Embiid and Reed. Certainly you're not that confident in Bamba after what he showed in the preseason, but I also think they have some options where they can potentially go with some small ball centers. So I don't expect them to, give up any future draft capital to get a 3rd string center. Also, if you do have any questions, please drop them into the chat now. We'll try to get to a couple of them here in the last segment. And if you're not a subscriber to the YouTube, please do so. That will allow you to participate in the chat and join in on the fun. Before that, a quick word from FOCO. FOCO is a leading manufacturer of sports and entertainment merchandise, with a product line that includes apparel, accessories, toys, collectibles, novelty items, and more. It's the best officially licensed gear for all sports and fandoms, and with it being football and tailgating season, it means that overalls, hoodies, hats, sunglasses, bags, everything you need for a game, FOCO has. And FOCO has hooked PHLY up and provided awesome pieces for our sets. FOCO always has our back for Philly sports, and they have yours too. Get the best gear around by using the link in our description. for all non-presale items. Use a promo code PHLY for 10% off. All right. So I guess any other stray thoughts here on today's proceedings before we maybe get to some questions here in the chat?
So I was not as up on Rob Covington's situation, like his off the court stuff,
Right.
as I would have liked to be. He talked a lot today about the offseason bringing clarity, and that so he told us that he was in a custody battle for his daughter during the offseason, and that, you know, as much as last season was tough for him in terms of kind of disappearing role and struggles on the floor, that it was more important for him to sort out his personal life and gain clarity there throughout this offseason. And it seems that he has it, and he's in a good headspace with that. I think he's posted some things on social media recently with his daughter, about his daughter, and like the strength that his family is bringing him. And so that sounds like fresh start here for everything, like to leave that kind of behind in LA at his previous stops and to be able to move forward. I think that, and he was really excited, quite frankly, to come back to Philadelphia. Like I said, this is where it all started for me, put himself on the map there. So on a personal human level, I feel pretty excited for him to be able to get that here. And, you know, I don't know what kind of role he's going to play here. He has certainly taken a step back on multiple fronts on the floor, but no, it's a situation where you root for him to figure things out here for sure.
Yeah.
So that, I thought that was interesting and worth noting to the people at home, that I feel like we sit here and we talk a lot about all the minutia and the ins and outs of the on-court stuff, but it's important to remember these guys are human, and, you know, they go through all the same stuff that people in this chat, Derek and I, people at our company, I'm sure, go through every day. And you have to remember that as I'm taking a blowtorch to somebody after a bad game. You never know what's going on with them.
But we still have to be critical, but they are people underneath for sure. Corey with another super chat there in the chat. And again, we'll answer some questions. You don't have to pay us. We appreciate that, but don't feel compelled to. We appreciate it if you can, though. How about trading for Robert Williams from Portland?
I wish he could shoot. And then, but if he could shoot, he's probably
I like him a
$30
lot.
million player.
He's a tough fit next to Embiid. And when you're talking about in the playoffs, you're not going to give up that much draft assets, and it's going to cost something to get Robert Williams. Like, he's not coming free or cheap,
which is why they wanted him in that package.
I don't think it makes sense for the Sixers to be a team that would give up enough to pry him away from Portland, is the way I'd answer it.
I also don't
think he'd be happy playing 13 minutes a night or anything like that.
Well, I was going to say, so if you're trading for him, I think you have to be a team that believes he can play starter level minutes.
Yeah.
I don't think that's with Joel Embiid. You would have to have absolutely lights out shooting everywhere else. Now, Maxey is providing that, and on volume and efficiency right now, so that's good. But the 2 and 3 spots are a lot more of a mystery with the two of them. And I just think that the complications that poses, it's not like, so we've seen Kelly Oubre operate in that baseline dunker area, right? And Joel have some success passing there. You look at it and say, well, maybe Robert Williams has some success there. Yeah, sure, maybe situationally. But Kelly Oubre can step out and hit a three and is willing to take basically any three that you give him. Robert Williams is not, and is a long way from being there. And so teams would defend that appropriately based on that. And so I'm not in on anything that compromises spacing for Joel. And that's why Markkanen was the guy I brought up earlier.
That brings up a good question then from Marty Bones. What about Smart from Memphis when they need to change it up? And you've been predicting the Memphis blow up here for all preseason.
I'm not going to take my victory lap yet, but boy, do they look like shit so far.
So would you compromise spacing for Marcus Smart?
I don't think so, man. I like Marcus. I've never loved him as much as everyone else. Now, look, you see him play every day. You get the professional irritant. He'd turn into a folk hero in short order if he's like taking it to the Celtics. I also think there needs to be a moratorium on former Celtics feature players after the Al Horford signing went completely off the rails. So that's kind of my piece on that.
I think I like Marcus a little more than Kyle does, or at least I'd be willing to take the chance. Maybe I just want the whole theater of it.
Well, I mean, if you get him for a cut rate price, but they already traded a bunch for him, so I don't think that's happening.
I think they're going to hold on to him almost regardless of what happens with their season. Dave in the chat saying Rocco is the reason we went and got Horford. I'm going to need you to explain that one because I'm not sure I'm necessarily seeing the connection. Again, Rocco was traded in the Jimmy Butler trade. Horford was not signed until 9 months after that. So I'm not sure I see the connection there. But unless they're just talking because they lost to the Celtics, like I'm not sure where he's going with that. I don't
one
think
thing we
connected.
didn't get to, Derek, I wanted to ask you on was the reporting that ownership was heavily involved in the trade talks being accelerated. Do you want to share with the people what Daryl had to say and I guess your overall thoughts on the reporting there?
Yeah, I mean, Daryl basically said that owners are involved in every trade. They have to have sign off. They have to be kept up to speed on every trade negotiation. And this one wasn't any different in that regard, and that they basically weren't any more involved than they typically are. Certainly, I think owners are involved, I think, more than people think they are, including good owners and bad owners. Like Jeffrey Lurie is certainly involved.
Oh, yeah.
Bad owners are certainly involved too. They buy these teams because they care about sports and they want to see it do well, and because they've been successful, and they probably think that their involvement in things make things more successful. So they're always going to be involved. They're always going to have final say. I think what's interesting is, why did this come out? Why did somebody want it presented like ownership was more involved in this, when it's probably something you could say about, like, you could probably have a report come out that ownership is involved in every trade. So why did someone make it a big deal about this one? And I think what I would say with some of the reporting is always look at who they're closest with, and maybe who, some reporters that are front office people, some reporters that are, players and agents people. Who wants it to be known that maybe Daryl needed some help getting this trade done? I think I have my theories on that, but I don't think Josh Harris was like on the phone with Ballmer saying like, no, we need these protections on this pick.
Right.
I also don't get any sense that Harris said like this needs to happen right now. I don't necessarily buy that reporting. So it was just weird. It
was strange. I want to shout out Khalif in the comments, who says typically lurk in these chats, but wanted to say we're doing a great job and looking forward to the season's coverage. I'm not shouting you out because you said we did great, although that always helps. But someone who's making their appearance for the first time, we always like to see the first time commenters. So
if you don't want to drop a super chat, and again, we've never really promoted super chats. They just started coming in yesterday, and we appreciate that.
Which we love and appreciate.
The other way to make sure that you get mentioned is to say something complimentary about us. It will work almost every time, especially if you're a first time commenter. But really, I mean, if you say something tomorrow, we'll probably bring it up.
Yeah. So I'm 100% with you, Derek. I think the takeaway for me is that every NBA owner is involved. Now, where we might be able to make a point of distinction, I don't know this. This is just pure speculation here, so stay with me. Daryl has denied that Maxi's early season play and how the team looks matters in terms of when they made the trade and what they got back for James. I would say the ownership and other people who are not paid to be basketball ops people would be more reactionary to say, well, look at how good Tyrese is. We don't need to wait around for James and get this done. And the fan base is saying, oh, look, we don't need James back and blah, blah, blah. And there might be some more listening to feedback in that respect. I don't think Daryl, frankly, gives a shit about any of that.
No, he's a robot. Yeah.
But I do think that maybe there are people outside of the front office that would be more susceptible to that type of reasoning.
Yeah. No, I agree. And look, it was like the way Maxi played made us sit up here and say, like, I really don't want to watch James play basketball with this team. And like, we felt like he had to, because that was the only way to get to a point where another team would enter the trade market. But it turns out that the Clippers, and again, I don't want to say that the Clippers caved, because they didn't give up they didn't give up that other unprotected pick, but they found a way to get Daryl Morey what he wanted, which was always that second first round pick. I think both teams can probably feel like they potentially left something off the table. I think the Sixers probably feel like if they would have pushed this out until the trade deadline, gotten a second team involved, they might have been able to get more. I think there's logic behind that belief. And I think the Clippers probably believe that, hey, if we would have let this play out for another couple of weeks, Harden could have really put them in a tough spot. We might have been able to get them cheaper. If both teams are feeling like they left a little bit on the table, that's probably a pretty good place to settle. And I think that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. We titled the podcast essentially, did the Sixers get enough? And I think we probably both fall in they got enough. It wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't disappointing. It was in the Goldilocks just right, probably for both sides category. And we move on.
Here's what I'll say. I have a piece that I'm working on coming out, and sort of like the nightmare scenario is if you get to, let's say, because one of the big benefits of this trade is that all of those medium-sized contracts the Sixers have can be aggregated on January 1st, a month and a half before the trade deadline. The nightmare scenario was to have Harden on the roster, sort of get into late December, where you could no longer separate this into two trades and then have him become just an unmitigated pain in the ass to the point where you can't have him on anymore. Because at that point, then you have to hope that you can get Harden involved in a 3-team trade and make it in one transaction. And the market might not be ready for that. There might not be another star, an OG, whoever we talk about. That might not have lined up. So there is benefit to the Sixers to get this done now, not only because, the Clippers could have gained leverage, but also because making it so that you had to make this a single transaction carried some risk. So are the Sixers leaving something on the table by doing it now? Maybe a little bit, but I don't think it's that much. Like, I don't think you were getting 3 first-round picks. I don't think you're going to get a second unprotected pick. I don't think you were getting a super high value, an additional super high value pick. So if you're only leaving up like a little bit on the table to avoid all of that risk, I think it makes sense.
By the way, we have another super chat from
What
Ernest
are you guys
Peterson.
doing? There's got to be a better way to spend $5. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Don't discourage the people. We really appreciate you, Ernest. He says, what is it? Just because I want to support you guys, one of 2 Philly pods I listen to, and also Clippers traded Phillip to the Kings for cash.
Can I just say, because we might not get to talk about Phillip with an F all that much anymore. Whenever I hear that name, I think of Will Smith on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air saying Phillip dismissively. It just sounds like you would pronounce Phillip like that. I don't know why, but it pops in my head every time.
Well, Ernest, if we're one of 2 Philly pods that you listen to, we really, really appreciate that on top of the super chats. And is that a good place to stop for today?
Yeah,
Derek? I think we got to enough.
We're
coming up on an hour here. We have quite a few people with us again today. I want to thank a whole hell of a lot of you. I see DDR, Ronald, Gavin, Marty, Casey, Dan, Bob, Dave, Bo Jensen, Brian, Dan, Ernest. I wish I could remember the names of our other super chatters we had today. We have Khalif, Hypothetical Man, 2 Minute Warning. So many of you guys with us each and every day. Tomorrow, Derek and I will be, Derek and I believe Rich will be on for the post-game show after their second home game of the year. I'll be popping in with you guys from the arena with some live updates from the locker room after Nick Nurse speaks after the game, win or loss. And then programming update, we are not doing a Friday show now. We will be doing a post-game show Saturday after the Phoenix Suns game. And Biggie hits us with one more super chat on the way out and said, "What do you want to read it since it's addressed to you, Derek?"
Drop your theory on why Josh Harris's involvement was leaked. My theory is it came from the player angle of it. I'll just leave it at that.
That's all you're giving our wonderful super chat question there, Derek?
I mean, I think who would be upset and want to minimize Daryl Morey's role? That's why I think.
Okay. Well, thank you guys very much for rocking with us as always. If you can, on the way out, if you haven't already, hit that thumbs up button, hit the subscribe, get notifications with the bell icon so you can see us whenever future shows are posted. And Derek, I will talk to you tomorrow.
Sounds good.